Hi there, welcome back. This is Casey, and in today's video I'm going to be doing an iridology reading, and the two main topics that we're going to be covering in this iris reading are hypoglycemia and malabsorption. And this person does have a rather chronic case of both of these. And she does experience fairly severe hypoglycemia, and she's also struggling with malabsorption, malnutrition, and keeping weight on. So we're looking at someone whose goal is to strengthen their body a bit so she may continue on with her healing journey. All right, so we're going to be talking about different approaches to that, and we know that generally speaking with detoxification, it is quite common to lose a lot of weight, and you can be on all fruit, for instance, or juice fasting, and or a combination of both, and you can be losing weight, and especially if you have a malabsorption ring, which we're going to be looking at. And then all of a sudden, when you sort of have that breakthrough and your kidneys start filtering, your body will start building back up on the same protocol or the same diet. So it's fairly common with detoxification for this to occur. However, this person has just had this experience, throughout the last several years, and she would like to address this and strengthen her body so she may continue with her healing and detox journey. So yeah, we're going to be discussing some approaches to healing this, and towards the end of the video I will be speaking to some of the benefits of some plants, herbs, seeds, berries, fruits, roots, things of that nature. So a protocol in terms of diet and herbs that I would recommend for challenges with nutrient absorption, malabsorption, and hypoglycemia. And so before we get started, thank you so much for being here, for watching. And if you are interested in a reading, you can find all that info in the description box. All my links are there. And if you have any questions, always feel free to send me an email or leave a comment here. Okay, so as you can see, we do have both of the eyes on the screen, and I'm just going to go over some of my first impression, at a first glance, thoughts on what I'm seeing. And so we do have, you can see in the iris fibers that we do have quite a strong constitution. And hold on here just one second. Let me see if I can get my pointer working. Okay, so we're seeing tightly woven iris fibers. We are seeing some white in the iris fibers, and we're seeing that that would indicate inflammation, acute inflammation. And then we're also seeing some zigzagging in the iris fibers, and I will speak to that when we get to each eye. But generally speaking, the zigzag fibers indicate a bit of frustration of unused energy or potential, and just some stress within the system overall. And other than that, though, the fibers are, like I said, very closely woven. This is a very strong constitution. You can see that there aren't, I would say, really not, maybe a few very small iris fiber openings or lacuna, but really not a lot. So we're not seeing a good number of lacuna. We're not seeing a lot of openings in the iris fibers. We do have some areas that we will speak to when we get into the more specifics that are showing a little bit of weakness in terms of separation of iris fibers and the darkness that you'll see that goes along with that, and especially in these two areas in here. And then the main thing for me and also this area, I really don't know. In both eyes, I'm not sure this could be a reflection. I'm not really sure what else to attribute that marking to. So I'm seeing it as a reflection. But overall, what the first thing that stands out to me in these eyes, and of course I've already gathered the health history for this person, and so this is sort of what I'm looking for already. But even so, and I'm guessing if you're watching this for educational purposes, you will probably have noticed already that we do have a lot of color in the stomach and bowel area. So the solar plexus, essentially. And we have orange, and we have yellow, and then we also have a rather pronounced malabsorption ring, or stress, quite chronic in the pupillary margin area. So the area right outside and the margin, meaning, the edge of, so we're looking at the edge of the pupil. We see a rather pronounced malabsorption ring or absorption ring, which is indicating challenges with nutrient absorption. And then also, and we're seeing that, so this is the left eye that I have my cursor on, and we see that there's a difference in the pupil size. So we have a slightly larger pupil in the left eye, and in this left eye I'm also seeing a stronger or more pronounced weakness in the left adrenal gland, which I'll get into, and then more color in this left eye. And so we're seeing that the bowel wall here is rather ropey, and this can indicate and would indicate a good amount of congestion, and Dr. Morse refers to this sign as lymphatic congestion, as anywhere from acute to chronic lymphatic congestion within the bowel wall. And so when we see congestion within the bowel wall, that's going to go right along with what we're looking for, which are signs of malabsorption. And in both of these eyes, I will note that, so we have the small intestines that are considered a part of the bowel wall. In the medial iris of both eyes. Okay, so when you trace out the bowel wall in the iris, on the medial portion, which medial means midline, it comes from that medi word anyway, and it means towards the nose, so towards the center of the body. And in the autonomic nerve wreath or bowel wall, the medial portion are the small intestines. Okay, so this is already showing us that we have a decent amount of congestion, and that is where most of the color is being concentrated, is in the small intestine area. And we're also seeing that the medial portion and so the small intestine is the area of the intestines that is primarily the area where nutrients are absorbed. So here is our first clue and our first connection to malabsorption. And so when we're looking at the presence of malabsorption through the lens of iridology, we will note a few different signs, and as I've just highlighted, one of those will be not just the health of the entire bowel wall or autonomic nerve wreath and the presence of congestion or pigmentation or discoloration, but especially that of the medial portion of that bowel wall, which is the small intestine portion. And so we do see this here in this iris, so we're already seeing challenges with nutrient absorption when we have this much congestion within the small intestines. And we're also seeing, this would be something else to look out for, as I've noted, we have yellows and oranges pretty much primarily focused within the digestive system. And when you have yellow, especially when you see it in the digestive system, that can indicate the presence of sulfur and a sulfur imbalance. And that can come about through a few different ways. And the most common one would be the consumption or ingestion of pharmaceuticals, in which in this case this person did take a good number of pharmaceuticals in her earlier years as a child and growing up. Okay, so we do have sulfur, and that would be the yellow. Sometimes yellow can also indicate challenges in the kidneys. I'm seeing both here, actually, to be honest. And then also we're seeing orange. And orange, generally speaking, we'll check the pancreas, but it will indicate stress within the pancreas, and the orange color is indicating the enzymatic process of the pancreas. And we're seeing all of that in the stomach and the small intestines. And then another thing that we will be looking at with regard to malabsorption will be the duodenum, and I will show you that area when we get to the right iris specifically, when we're mapping out the eyes. Okay, so far we have sulfur, we have pancreas insufficiency or disturbance, we have a ropey and congested bowel wall, and especially in the small intestine area or medial portion of both eyes. And then I would say the main marking that you will see related to malabsorption or challenges with nutrient absorption is here in the pupillary margin. And this person does have a rather chronic pupillary margin, and we can see that in the dark. It's pretty much black, and we can see that surrounding the pupil. And so we see an uneven, jagged pupillary margin, and it is dark in color, and that is showing us that there are chronic levels of disturbance in the stomach lining and challenges with nutrient absorption. And we're also seeing fairly consistent throughout these very small, fine radii, solaris, all emanating from the pupillary margin, indicating toxicity that is originating from the stomach lining and the stomach itself, and emanating, radiating itself throughout the entire digestive system. And this person has indicated feelings of, for lack of a better way of describing this, a sort of porousness, and where anything that she is eating is affecting her right away. And so we'll get into that also when we're looking at the hypoglycemia, but it's as if the food is causing a reaction of toxicity within her body almost instantly. And so, as we know, one of the very first areas that the food goes after we chew it and swallow it is the stomach. And so we can see this sort of reflection of porousness within the stomach lining. Okay, so just a few more words on the pupil ring of nourishment and absorption. And we see here that this iris sign indicates challenges with nutrient absorption and undernourishment, and it can indicate acute to degenerative stomach lining as well, often indicative of gastritis and overacidity. And we can also have, in a chronic state, we would have hypohydrochloric acid, which is what I believe we have in this case. And you will be watching for any radii solaris emanating from the pupil, which we do see. These will lead to possible areas of degenerative tissue due to toxicity from the stomach. And there is impaired digestion due to inflammation. And I want to note also, and we'll see this when we get into the more specific mapping, this person has had her appendix removed. And the appendix, we know now today, is a rather essential, you know, obviously we have many who are living and thriving without their appendix, but it is a rather essential part of the digestive system and would play a role in malnourishment or the inability to receive nutrients from food, as it is a pretty major lymphatic organ, and it also has been found more in recent years to be a sort of storehouse for healthy bacteria. So when we don't have an appendix, we're starting out with a sort of disadvantage in terms of gut bacteria, which we know now are crucial to the overall health of the gut, the nervous system, the entire body. So that's definitely something that's going along with the overall big picture of why this person is so challenged with nutrient absorption. And so some of the more emotional or spiritual aspects of the pupillary margin or the ring of nourishment, some keywords are light of spirit, receptivity to love. So this has to do with nourishment and how we receive nourishment from our food, and translated into a more emotional perspective, it has to do with how well we receive nourishment from those around us and love from those around us. Alignment and release, contentment, satisfaction, hunger, ease, love, community, and purpose. And the pupil ring reflects the condition of the stomach wall and the central nervous system. In health, the pupil ring represents an even circle of medium brown color. The more degenerated the condition, the more jagged, dark, and uneven the pupil ring is. And this is referred to by Farida Sharan as the ring of nourishment. And that is such because she says it meets the light of the spirit from the life of the person shining through the pupil, and relates to receptivity to love, nourishment, and the higher spiritual virtues of trust, faith, and compassion. Nourishment requires receptivity to assimilate and embody energies that satisfy, as well as the willingness to release what does not satisfy in all aspects of relationship with food, drink, and other sources of comfort. And I want to note here as well, and this I believe plays a major factor in why this person is on this particular healing journey. As we'll see with our healing journey, a lot of times things come up, things are reflected and right in our face a lot of times in order to be healed, and those relate to earlier traumas, whether they be emotional or physical, that we have endured. And I want to note here as well, because it connects so much with what we are looking at in terms of malabsorption and nutrient absorption and receptivity and nourishment, that unfortunately this person also experienced in her early childhood years of mental, emotional, and physical abuse from her mother. And the mother being, traditionally and ideally that very source of nourishment and love, and the one who is thought to, and in many cases does, provide us with nourishment, and in that process teaches us as young children how to nourish and nurture ourselves. And so I wasn't all that surprised. I was more fascinated, and I just think it's another testament to the concept of how healing occurs, and how trauma occurs, and how that process unfolds throughout our life. So we have this connection between not receiving nourishment as a young child, at least in the form of loving compassion, and then as an adult being challenged with these same issues. So we're seeing here, like we do so many times, that when stuff comes up, that's our opportunity to heal the origination of that trauma, and ultimately the manifestation of dis-ease or discomfort in our lives. All right, so we will, like I said, we're going to be looking at the pancreas itself. We're already seeing signs of stress within the pancreas. We'll be looking at the duodenum. We're already seeing the congestion in the small intestines and the toxicity emanating from the solar plexus or the stomach lining. And speaking of which, just one last thing before we move on. The solar plexus is the energetic center of it's the center of the body. The solar plexus is the Manipura chakra. So it's essentially our power center, our center for creativity. It holds the element of fire. It inspires us with dynamism. It excitement, joy, and self-confidence. And so all of these things are also reflected in the physical presentation of this area of digestion. It's the area of fire. It's where the fire exists, is in our belly in order to digest our foods. And so the solar plexus plays a key role in transmitting emotional impulses to the digestive system. Man's deepest, strongest thought impulses are reflected here. We experience physical tensions such as butterflies, nausea, sinking feelings, and indigestion, but the influence is greater. It is sometimes referred to as the emotional brain or the body brain because it looks more like the brain than any other part of the body. And this is from Farida Sharon's Iridology book, and she says shocks also have a strong impact on the solar plexus region, and unless released will affect changes in digestion which may become permanent. Through the SNS, or the sympathetic nervous system, the solar plexus connects the stomach with the heart and the mind, thus acting as a vital receiving and distribution center. The solar plexus is also connected here via the SNS to the adrenal endocrine glands. Strong emotions are felt in the stomach, and the body reacts to adrenal stimulus. And she continues, the stomach region, which includes the solar plexus, is the physical reflection of discriminatory brain centers where we decide what we will accept into our being. The physical function of selection, digestion, and assimilation are a reflection of these mental processes of discrimination. And as the Chinese say, the pure is separated from the impure. This emotional brain is part of the sympathetic nervous system, which reacts to fear, stress, new experiences, or exams even. This is often felt as butterflies, a knot in the stomach, or tension. All right, so we will continue to explore this topic as we move through our iris analysis. And I'm just going to see here if I want to mention anything else that is more full body systemic. And the hypoglycemia we can see in both eyes, and we've already seen the pancreas weakness reflected in the orange discoloration, and we've noted how the weakness in the pancreas is related to, along with these other factors, malabsorption and nutrient absorption, challenges with that, and especially just the digestion of food. And we're also going to see that the pancreas is related to blood sugar and hypoglycemia, and as well, we're going to see that the adrenal glands are critical to the balance of blood sugar within the body. And so when you have hypoglycemia, quite often you're also going to have hypoadrenals. And so we see that in the left eye. We're going to note that also somewhat in the right eye. And so the adrenal glands, in the sense that they monitor the levels of blood sugar in their role to keep us safe. Low blood sugar is one of those things that will come across their radar, and they will secrete hormones, especially notably cortisol and adrenaline, in order to signal the liver in releasing stored glycogen into the body to increase the blood sugar within the body. So they are paramount in healthy blood sugar, and so we'll note that when we get to each eye, the specific health of each adrenal gland. And let's see what else that I may see. We do see cholesterol. You can see the shimmer, the glimmer in the lower eye, in the left eye, as well as in the top of the eye, in the head and brain area. And then we can also see that somewhat in the right eye, especially up at the top. We're seeing a skin ring in both eyes. And we also have, I believe I mentioned, the difference in pupil size from eye to eye. And just the pupil in general, again, is reflective of the nervous system, and especially the central nervous system when we're looking at the size of the pupil. And I did learn from this person about a very interesting and very rare condition. I can't remember the name of it, but because I had asked her about her vision, and I'll get to that in just a second, why I did. And she let me know that she has a condition where one of her eyes is nearsighted and one is farsighted, sort of by a lot. So it makes it very confusing for the brain to accept any kind of corrective vision measures. And so I thought that in the form of eyeglasses, because of the fact that one is nearsighted and one is farsighted. So that's really interesting. And I don't necessarily think that the pupil size being different is related to that condition, not at all. Maybe a little, just because of the connection to the central nervous system, but we do see differentiation in pupil size here and there for sure. It's not super uncommon, but I wanted to mention that. And then the reason that I asked her about her vision, which she said is okay, aside from that condition, it does get weaker and more poor towards the afternoon and into the evening, but she does have this cloudiness that is typical, and it's not super pronounced, but it is there. And if it were more pronounced, this cloudiness, I would say that we could have the presence of, or the pre-presence of, cataracts. All right, so that's that. And, you know, I'm also seeing very slight nerve rings in both eyes that I'll mention. Just very slight. So I will say that while we have both eyes up. And I think that's about it that I want to mention at this time. And I'm going to go ahead and grab the right eye chart and we'll get started with the right eye. All right, so we have the right eye, and we have already noted at the beginning of the video the pupillary margin and the malabsorption ring. We're seeing that here, and we see that in the darkness, in the jaggedness, and in the multiple splits in the iris fibers. And then we also have, as noted, a bit more color and congestion in the bowel wall in the small intestine area. And then we also have that, and that again is indicating when you have lymphatic congestion, you have automatically a challenge with nutrient absorption, because the walls of the small intestines, which absorb the nutrients from the food, are so congested they're not able to do so. And then we're seeing in the transverse colon a similar, even thicker bowel wall, even a little bit more ropey. And that to me is also indicative of the presence of mucoid plaque. And then there is just a lot of congestion and inflammation, and related to this congestion in the transverse colon that is extending into the head and brain area. And so I'm not able to see the pituitary or the pineal, but being that they are covered with lymphatic congestion and inflammation, signs of inflammation, I'm guessing that they are congested lymphatically speaking. I'm not seeing any kind of pronounced weakness though, because I cannot see them. And then in terms of brain zones, the one that's somewhat standing out to me, I mean, it's fairly continuous. You can see that the iris fibers are pretty continuous, not bad at all, like not radii solaris or pigmentation, anything like that in the head and brain, which is good to see. But I was drawn to this area in here, and this is the medulla. And there is, because of the, along with the medulla's many other functions, it is related to dizziness. I thought that was of significance because this person does experience dizziness, lightheadedness, and weakness in a pretty profound way, in an alarming way, even after she eats anything. And so that's where we're at. We have challenges with not only the nutrient absorption, but just like the ability to even stomach food, and as well as the effects that putting the food in the stomach has on her body. And so the dizziness could be related to the medulla here, or we're seeing it, I should say we're seeing it in the medulla, and then also in the adrenal gland. We're seeing that the adrenal gland, of course, can be responsible for dizziness as well. And she also experiences stress, some you know, I'm not sure on what level, if it's anxiety, but stress, of course, as her body is experiencing the other symptoms that go along with ingesting food, a little bit of anxiety. So I believe that may be connected to the adrenal gland's attempt to raise or balance the blood sugar and its secretion of the adrenaline. Okay, and so let's go ahead and just work counterclockwise. And one of the first things I noticed in these eyes, because like I said, you know, they're fairly continuous throughout. Strong, definitely a strong constitution, so she is blessed with that. But this is an area in here, and this is the shoulder. The right shoulder did have a rotator cuff surgery, and so we're seeing that reflected in the iris as one of the major weaknesses. And then below that, we have a similar looking weakness in the lung area. And then, as noted, there is definitely a skin ring, possibly some anemia ring showing in that darkness and the blue. And so, and speaking of the skin, and I will give some recommendations, like as mentioned at the end of the video, because of her sensitivity to everything, food, herbs, even liquids, I'm going to talk about how to, and this will be especially useful for people with malabsorption, how to introduce the medicinal properties of plants into the body through the skin. So we're going to be talking about the skin at the end of the video in terms of a vehicle for nutrients, and as well as medicinal properties. Okay, so let's see, what else? I'm traveling down here. Not a lot, definitely some weakness, like we said, in the lung area. This little sort of cloud of lymph or congestion is looking to me like the gallbladder, and then above that we have the duodenum. And I think I mentioned at the beginning of the video we'd be looking at the duodenum because it is part of the big picture in terms of malabsorption, in that it is the first part of the small intestines. And also the duodenum receives the bile and alkalizing enzymes as food moves into the small intestine. So again, we're seeing here the relationship to the malabsorption. And then below that we have the liver zone. Nothing of huge importance there. but definitely in the gallbladder, so probably some attention could be given to the liver. And then right next to that we have the pancreas, and below the pancreas we have the ovary. So seeing some congestion in the pancreas area and some darkness in general between the duodenum, the pancreas, and the cecum. So the cecum is the first part of the large intestine. Cecum is also involved in the digestive process, very much so in terms of absorbing nutrients. All right, and then I'm seeing the appendix right in here. I'm seeing it could even be this very specific marking sort of within and without of the bowel wall. And like I said, she did have her appendix removed. And then the zone below that is calling out to me a bit because it's zigzag fibers and they're all sort of bunched together. And so the zone below that is the abdominal wall, also very close to the groin. So again, more stuff with the gut. And then we have this interesting transverse fiber that goes across from the pelvis, abdominal wall, hip area, goes all through there. And transverse fibers do indicate stress or tension within the body. And that was another pretty significant marking that I first noticed with her eyes, was that one transverse fiber. I believe that may be related to the appendix as it cuts right through that whole zone. Okay, and then we have the thyny foot, and there is a dark area towards the top of the thyny foot, so probably above the knee or somewhere in that area. And then this whole zone in here, I would say including this area, would be the kidney and adrenal glands. So again, we have these wavy fibers, or zigzag fibers, a little bit like a very, very mild split, or a very mild crypt-like opening in the iris fibers in the kidney. And the darkness and arrangement of fibers continues up into the adrenal gland, but it's not as pronounced as in the left eye. This whole area is female reproductive organs. This person did experience some trauma related to the female reproductive system. We may note that it is a little bit darker right in this area, which is the uterus. Okay, and then we have, just kind of moving through here, we have the back, bladder. I'm not seeing anything of super importance in here. I'm seeing this dark area still at the bottom of the parathyroid zone and into the esophagus. So the esophagus, and then the vocal cords above that, and then the thyroid above that. The esophagus, and I believe, is related to this dark area here in the small intestines, and there may be a connection. This person did have some trauma, some choking and near drowning, so there's going to be some stress in that whole entire throat area. I'm seeing it in the esophagus and even in the trachea and vocal cords. And then above that we have the thyroid. Nothing of major importance that I'm seeing in the thyroid. Fairly continuous again, some inflammation, some congestion. More so the parathyroid, at least in this iris. And then above that we have the tonsils, and the tonsils were removed. So I would say this split right here is related to the tonsils, and then below that we have the larynx and pharynx. Again, the throat. So the throat chakra, speaking, communicating, creativity, truth, all that stuff I mentioned when I talk about the throat chakra is likely highlighted for this person. All right, let me look at my notes and see. Yeah, I think that's it for the right eye. And I'm going to now move on to the left eye. All right, so continuing on with the left eye, I think I'm just going to leave what I have here. So we have, of course, the pupillary margin. We have a bit of a larger pupil, which is indicating to me a bit more stress in the nervous system, and especially in the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. This eye in general just has a few more challenges, mostly just in terms of the yellow and orange and the thickness of the bowel wall, perhaps, but mostly in the discoloration. And then we're also seeing that the lymphatic congestion in its acute phase would be in white, and we're seeing in the lymphatic zone, which is close to the skin zone in the periphery of the iris, a mild yellowing, and I'm thinking that that is subacute to chronic lymphatic congestion. So yeah, this eye just shows a little bit more stress, perhaps a little bit more weakness. And then back to this that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, is it a reflection? It's also somewhat connected to this marking that is especially white lymphatic congestion in the back area, but I've never seen a patch like that be so perfectly like a slice almost. So I suppose it could be a patch of inflammation and lymphatic congestion, or a reflection from the eyelid or some way that the photo was taken. So yeah, if you all have any thoughts on that, please do let me know. And so, all right, let's go ahead and get started. I want to start here with the left adrenal gland, and you can see with the bowel wall that there is an indentation here in the bowel wall, and that could be stricturing within the bowel wall itself. And we are in the sigmoid colon area. And then just outside of the bowel wall, we have this dark area, and that would be the adrenal gland. So we definitely have some chronic adrenal in activity in the left iris, even more so than the right. And then we have here this tiny foot, just for mapping purposes, this would be at the 6 o'clock, and then I'm seeing this whole area, this whole zone as the kidney. So some weakness in the kidney, which would go along with what I'm seeing in terms of more weakness overall in the left eye and probably the left side of the body. Okay, and then alongside that and the kidney in this area here, again, we have the female reproductive area, the female reproductive organs, especially the ovary, or excuse me, I'm sorry, the uterus. And the skin ring, as you can see in its darkness, increases in the lung area, which is fairly common to see that, as the lungs are one of the body's eliminative organs, or the respiratory system itself, and as well as the skin. So there are challenges with elimination related to the lungs and the skin. So it's common to see the skin ring become darker over the lung area. And then while we're up here in this area, this spot right in here, we're seeing a little bit of darkness. Again, more zigzagging, and that is the neck. So tension in the neck, or what have you, I'm not sure, but there is something showing up in the neck. And then we're in this really interesting, very orange and thick portion of the bowel wall in here. And don't worry, I'm going to come down and take a look at the heart in just a second. But this whole area where there's just a lot of thick lymphatic congestion, and especially orangey and yellowy, of course, so we have the sulfur, the pancreas, and this zone in here is catching my eye because of this dip in the transverse colon. I'm not sure if it's enough of a dip to warrant a prolapse, but there's a dip, and it to me is sort of highlighting this whole area in here. And this is an area of a couple of different brain zones. So we do have the inherent mental, which is the anxiety brain zone, which is quite often seen in cases of anxiety. And you can read more about the brain zones if you would like to on my website. I'm about to do some just short videos on each brain zone, but inherent mental is diagonal from the adrenal gland. So not surprised to be seeing this. And then alongside that, we have the equilibrium and dizziness center. So again, dizziness. And then alongside that, where this congestion kind of dips up, but it's still really heavy, we have, again, the medulla brain zone. There is a little bit of darkness in the 12 o'clock or animation life zone. So that is related to energy, joy for life, a number of other qualities. I associate it with the crown chakra, as it is directly at 12 o'clock in the iris. And then we're seeing some pretty major congestion and a little bit of a differentiation in the bowel wall here where the pineal gland is, and then the pituitary is next to that. So again, I can't see any structural weakness. It is covered essentially by lymphatic congestion. But a lot of times, even if that is the case, you can see markings beneath that. So I'm not seeing anything extraordinary happening in the pituitary, a little bit, maybe a little bit in the pituitary, and then possibly more so the pineal gland. Okay, let's backtrack here. So we have at 3 o'clock and just above, so in the 2:45, 3 o'clock area, we have the heart located outside of the bowel wall. I'm seeing this area right here as the heart, maybe a little bit below that. There are some wavy fibers. Maybe a little bit above that, we would see the aorta. This could be the aorta right in there, in which case there could be some weakness in the aorta, but I'm not seeing a lot of weakness in the heart or the aorta. It looks pretty good. There are some wavy fibers outside of it in the lung area, however. So there could be some congestion within the heart area, but I'm not seeing any genetic predispositions or anything like that. Like I said, possibly it's a little bit dark in this area, and I would say that is the aorta, but nothing major. And then below that, we have a little bit more in the lung area showing up. The solar plexus is below that. Not seeing anything super significant, but just because we've seen so much with and this would be the solar plexus in a physical sense, not the chakra itself. And then this is all, you know, possibly a little bit in the arm hand, going into the spleen. And then outside of the solar plexus, some weakness in the rib area. We have the ovary in this area. Again, just a lot of congestion and orange discoloration. This area of the bowel is the sigmoid. The sigmoid is the last part of the descending colon. It can tend to be quite toxic, especially if we are holding waste there. And then I did want to mention this area, which is the mesentery. So the mesentery is an organ in the abdominal region, and it surrounds your intestines and holds them in place. It is also significant in that it houses lymph nodes. So some stress in the sigmoid and the mesentery. And then of course below that we have the abdominal wall, so just more emphasis on the digestive system, the abdominal wall, showing some darkness in there. All right, let's see if I had any other notes for this. I don't see anything. Definitely the cholesterol. And yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it for now anyway. And I'm going to go on to discuss some of the protocol that I would recommend, not only for this person, because she's having special circumstances in that, like I've mentioned, she's having a really hard time ingesting anything. So I'm going to be discussing some protocol for people who can be taking herbs, like in which she will be able to at some point soon here, hopefully, and for what I'm seeing in this iris. And also I'm going to talk to you about the topical application of herbs, and I will do that in just one moment, so I'll see you guys then. All right, so I'm going to be going over a few plants and possible formulas for malabsorption and some basic protocol to go along with that, as well as hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. And I will mention some Dr. Morse formulas as well. So as I have noted, this is going to be based on this person's iris, but it's going to be the general recommendations for malabsorption and hypoglycemia. This one is having trouble, as I've said, getting anything into her body, and so she may or may not be able to use these herbs, but that's why I am finding it important to give the individual plants so she can try each one rather than take a formula and just have it not work and then not be exactly sure which one it is or which ones they are in the formula. Okay, so for malabsorption, as we've been talking about, we're looking at the stomach lining here in the iris. We're also looking at the small intestines, and we're looking at the ability for the body to not only break down food through the digestive process, through mastication, and through the different enzymes that the pancreas secretes, and as well as the gallbladder's function in and role in the process of digestion. What we're really looking at primarily along with these digestive organs is the concept of removing the mucoid plaque, as well as removing as much lymphatic congestion as we can. And that is a process. Both of those are a process. So for malabsorption, I'm going to recommend, in general, for a protocol that you would use the GI broom from Dr. Morse, and I'm going to give you some individual plants that are in that I find most especially useful, but I actually really love his GI broom. It's one of my favorite of his formulas. And so we're going to be looking at clearing the congestion within the digestive system through powders. In the GI broom has, let me give you a list of its ingredients. So it has psyllium, and then I'm just going to write down which of those ingredients I would say are most crucial and key in this process. So psyllium is the first. Psyllium is the first ingredient on the list of the GI broom, and it is the primary ingredient in cleaning out the digestive system, and it acts as a bulking agent, and not necessarily does it have specific laxative actions, but it does tend to create those effects in the body due to the bulking. And it also is mucilagenic, so it creates moisture within the GI tract as well. So psyllium is the top one here, and then he also has chickweed, and this is another one. That I find very useful, and this is one of the reasons I really love this formula. I think it's actually quite brilliant that he has chickweed as a second ingredient. Chickweed is a nutritive, and it is alkalizing, and so it would be one of those herbs that you could use in a formula such as a GI broom, as well as it would be a great herb for remineralizing and providing nutrition to the body. Okay, so chickweed, and then he has Cascara sagrada, and so I'm just going to write that down. I don't think that Cascara sagrada is a plant for everyone. It is a laxative, and I think that some people may need a little bit of it and some people may not. So I'm just going to mention that when you're looking at different GI formulas, a lot of times there's also the presence of a small amount of clay, which I don't see that. I think he started, I'm pretty sure he had a small amount of clay in this formula years ago, but I don't see it listed in the ingredients at this point. He does have activated charcoal. So Cascara sagrada is a question, and I personally keep that in capsules. I make my own bowel formula that does not have Cascara sagrada in it. It does have psyllium and a number of other ingredients, but psyllium being the main active ingredient. And then he has plantain, and I'm not going to write that one down. I'm going to just go ahead and go through this list. He also has fenugreek, marshmallow, slippery elm, white oak, Irish moss, bayberry, mullein, activated charcoal, ginger, acerola cherry, aloe, and cinnamon. And so the last 4 or so ingredients are more for flavor and digestibility, like the ginger, and especially the acerola cherry, cinnamon would be for flavor. And so going back up, I would say plantain is a very useful ingredient, especially because it is a nutritive also. I'm not going to list it for this specific purpose. I will say that fenugreek is another plant, and I believe if you've done any cooking, you know fenugreek is one of the most popular spices. I mean, used worldwide, but especially I associate it with Indian food. And fenugreek is a builder, and it has been used to increase the breast milk supply. It's also a lymphatic, and I really like fenugreek. You have to be careful because it does, especially if you apply it topically, which we're going to talk about, you will smell like an Indian restaurant. So some people say it smells like maple syrup, but I really associate it with Indian food. So, and fenugreek also is very effective in its diaphoretic properties, so it will stimulate sweating. It's actually one of my favorite plants that stimulates sweating, and it also is somewhat of a diuretic as well. And Dr. Morse has fenugreek not only in the GI broom, but he also has it in the Heal tea, in the Ultimate Herbal Blend, and then in one or more of his lymphatic formulas. So I'm just starring the things that are general plants that I would recommend for building. So with malabsorption, I'm also going to be addressing something that goes along with it, and that is excessive thinness. And as a builder, I think fenugreek is ideal for building weight and for providing nutrition, and then just as an overall detoxification plant. I'm not sure this one will be able to tolerate fenugreek, but I'm just listing it here anyway. So the other thing, let's go back to the GI broom and then just basic. So in any kind of bowel formula, you're going to have psyllium, likely Cascara sagrada, but psyllium is the key ingredient here. And then he has chickweed, Cascara sagrada, plantain, which would be awesome. It's also demulcent, so it is providing a moisture improving effect and a cooling effect. It's also used quite a lot in bowel formulas. I believe he probably has it in his capsule formulas as well. Now, for malabsorption and thinness, I am recommending either a tincture, especially with someone who is having a hard time ingesting substances, any kind of food or herbs. I would recommend a tincture or a tea, and just taking small amounts of that. And then marshmallow root is the next ingredient that he has listed after plantain, and I do have that on my list for this person and for these purposes of malabsorption. It is also demulcent and a diuretic. It creates not only a moisturizing mucilagenic effect, it's very, I don't know other word to describe marshmallow root, but it's sort of like it creates like a slime and it's slippery and it's thick. And I think that's ideal for cooling and calming and soothing the digestive system. And then slippery elm, he has in there slippery elm as it sort of has similar properties to marshmallow and plantain, and being that it is an endangered tree and really very much overused in the herbal industry, just especially considering that it is endangered. I'm not going to include that, but I'm guessing he gets it from a reliable, responsible source. I'm not saying anything about that, but I just don't use it personally unless it's already in a formula. And then white oak, Irish moss, bayberry root, skipping those, and then mullein, I would say, would be very helpful for restoring not only the digestive system, but as well mullein is a nutritive plant, and it is also an endocrine tonic, so it will work with the whole entire endocrine system. And so what we're looking at here, if you recall, we're looking at the adrenal glands primarily that we're seeing in this iris, and the adrenal glands are key in their function, is key in both of these things, hypoglycemia as well as malabsorption. And so mullein does affect all of the glands, but it will also address the adrenal glands. Okay, and then I think that's as far as his formula, the things that I would include for a malabsorption or thinness formula. Now, for malabsorption, so two things. We're looking at cleaning out the gut, and that is psyllium and some kind of formula with powders. And so GI broom is ideal, but you can also make your own with a combination of any of these ingredients, as long as psyllium is first on the list. And specifically for malabsorption, along with these plants, I would also add, there's two plants, maybe three, that I think are key for malabsorption, and one is alfalfa, and let me just, I have some notes here. see if I have notes on this. I mean, I don't need too many notes on alfalfa. It is the supreme nutritive plant, and Dr. Morse has it in several of his ingredients. He has it in Muscles by Nature, he has it in the Pituitary Formula, as well as the Superfood Explosion. And so alfalfa is just the queen or the king of plants with regard to minerals, vitamins, nutrition. So its root reaches very deep down into the earth and draws up the richness of that depth, and then it feeds it to the rest of the plant. So you could do alfalfa leaf tea, or you could also add alfalfa powder to your gut formula. So alfalfa, and then nettles. And I did inquire with my client here about nettle, because that was actually one of the first things on my list for her, and she has found it useful in the past, but more recently it's been too much. It is a pretty strong adrenal gland tonic, and that's why I'm recommending it in this circumstance. And so she may or may not be able to play around with that at some point in the future, but I do recommend nettle as nettle and alfalfa are the two for malabsorption, and just they are the absolute best herbal nutrition plants that I could think of. And nettle especially has the full, if you want to call it protein, it has the full amino acid profile, and very high in minerals and vitamins, just like alfalfa. And these two, and also possibly mullein, and possibly also chickweed, and even marshmallow root, I would say are the plants that I would use for topical use. So I want to talk about that for a minute. If you cannot take in nutrition through the digestive system for whatever reason, then one of the best things you can do for yourself is to make a tea or use a tincture with these ingredients or similar ingredients, or even just try the single, like try an alfalfa tincture or an alfalfa tea, and then apply this to your skin. And your skin, as the body's, well, it's the largest organ in the body, and it is one of the main methods or modes of elimination that the body uses to rid itself of toxins. And we do see here that we've noted that we have a skin ring, and so we're also addressing the health of the skin when we use this method of topical application. And the reason I think this method is so important, and it's very much underutilized, and hopefully in future times people will realize how efficient it actually is as a method of delivery for medicinal plants and just properties. And so as the skin is used by the body to rid itself of toxins, the skin also is open to receiving all kinds of things through the air and directly applied onto the skin. And the trick with this is you're looking for low weight molecules, so low size, small molecules, and those are created when you make a tea or a tincture. So for instance, if you just put some alfalfa, as we all know, you know this, if you just put alfalfa on your skin, unless you make like a paste or something like that, you would absorb some of it. But if you just put alfalfa on your skin, you're not going to absorb that into your blood. If you put alfalfa in the form of a tea or a tincture on your skin, you will absorb it into your blood. And what we're looking for with malabsorption and thinness, especially if someone's having a hard time ingesting nutrients through the digestive system, is getting that nutrition into the blood. And this method gets nutrition into the blood directly. All right, and so you can do an array of things to do this. I utilize this method myself, and I find that I get less detox symptoms from certain herbs when I apply them topically. And so you can do a dry brush, and then you could get a spray bottle. I've done that. You can spray it on, or you can even, like, sometimes I'll dip my dry brush in a tincture and just go about dry brushing with a little bit of moisture on the dry brush. You can also get a washcloth and soak it in a formula or a tea, a single tea or a multi-herb tea or tincture, and then just allow the washcloth to, you could rest it on your forehead, you could rest it on your stomach, you could lie down in a prone position and put it on your low back right over your kidneys. All of these things will absorb the herbal nutrition. Okay, and then along those lines, when you're looking at challenges with taking herbs into your body, a lot of people who are detoxing just completely don't use herbs from time to time when it's just too much, and I've definitely been in that case myself. So, but if you want to still be utilizing the botanical kingdom and having the energy of plants in your process, in your healing journey, you can do also flower essences, and these are homeopathic remedies, and so they are extremely diluted, and so they are purely energetic. So whatever detox symptoms or effects that they have on the body are through the etheric body, and so usually those effects are very mild, they're more emotional and spiritual, but they catalyze a process, a healing process within the body. So you can do flower essences, and you can also do what I think of as like micro-dosing, or I guess the more appropriate terminology would be homeopathic measure. So you're using a very, very small amount of the plant. You can just do a couple of drops, and that will carry the vibration of the plant into your body, and your body will still gain the benefits of having this energetic signature of that healing vibration within. Okay, and so these are basic malabsorption, thinness, and let me see if I have any more to include. Chicory root is very similar to dandelion. Dandelion root is recommended for hypoglycemia, and I like chicory for this purpose of hypoglycemia as well as malabsorption, because chicory also contains prebiotics. So we were speaking about the fact, especially with this one having her appendix removed and having that be the source, or this container that is storing healthy gut bacteria, chicory would be fantastic for that. And then as well, it is useful in raising or balancing out blood sugar. Okay, and it's also nutritive, and it's also diuretic, so it would go in this category with all of these plants here. Okay, and then I just have some random plants I want to put out there for these purposes. So we have also calendula would be, it's one of my favorite plants to use, and you can see the signature if you look at the plant itself, and then you look at, sometimes when we see this orange or yellow in the digestive system, calendula is a lymphatic, and it is especially suited to the digestive system. So I would recommend that in powder form if you're going to make your own bowel formula. Calendula is also geared towards the pancreas, as well as the whole entire digestive system. It's a mild lymphatic, so it's also antifungal. All right, and then we have horsetail as a nutritive. It is high in silica. It's also a kidney tonic. It has been found to regenerate the pancreas. And Dr. Morse has horsetail in his bone and connective tissue formula, in his eye health formula, in one or more of his kidney bladder formulas, as well as in the ultimate herbal blend. Okay, and then I want to include in this section here, not quite into the hypoglycemia yet. So we're looking at rose as an adrenal gland tonic. It's also calming, a relaxing nervine. So I would recommend that for this person. And in any formula, you can use that in a tea. I wouldn't necessarily include it in the topical application for that. I would probably just stick with the alfalfa, nettle, mullein, marshmallow root, possibly chickweed, the most nutritive plants that you are mineralizing and building and strengthening and alkalizing. Not like the blood can range too much, as we know, in its alkalinity, but it doesn't hurt to feed the blood with alkaline plants. So those are the ones I would stick with for that. Rose I would put into a tea. And then also we have wild yam. And wild yam is in Dr. Morse's adrenal support. It is building and calming. It's also in his GI Renew, in his Spasm Calm, and a few other formulas. It is a stomach tonic, and it is also hepatic, so it benefits the liver and gallbladder. I find it to be rather calming. So, and then we have astragalus. And astragalus is nourishing, and it is enhancing, strengthening for the adrenal gland. So it's an adrenal gland tonic, especially the cortex of the adrenal gland, which is the steroid producing portion. Astragalus is also a lymphatic, a restorative tonic. It is building, strengthening, and balancing. Dr. Morse has that in his endocrine gland formula, and again in his ultimate herbal blend. Okay, so chaste tree and saw palmetto I would both recommend for the adrenal glands, and they are really the two key plants for the pituitary gland. They are both endocrine tonics. Dr. Morse has both of these plants in his pituitary gland formula as well as his adrenal gland formula. So again, we are addressing the adrenal gland here. So chaste tree berry, and these you could, they might be, especially for this person's that I'm speaking to, her eye, it may be a lot to take these two plants, chaste tree berry and saw palmetto. Saw palmetto is also a builder. For me, it's very calming. What I would do with these two is use them in a tincture form and use a small amount of them, or apply the tincture to the skin. Okay, and think we're getting down to, we also have sarsaparilla, and that stimulates the production of cortin, which is a hormone that the adrenal glands produce. And when you have a small amount of cortin, you have that often will equal adrenal fatigue and hypoglycemia. And sarsaparilla has been found to improve thinness. It is a kidney tonic and antioxidant as well. And I think we're getting down. Now I want to talk about a few plants that will directly address the hypoglycemia. And so one of those would be, a lot of these, well, as I've mentioned, but very specifically we have gymnema. And this is used since ancient times in Ayurveda to help raise extremely low levels of blood sugar. And this addresses saccharides, which are a group of carbohydrates responsible for low blood sugar. So it slows the rate at which saccharides are absorbed by the intestines, thereby stabilizing blood sugar. And then as well, we have licorice root, and this person found licorice root to be very stimulating, which it can be. It will, in fact, also raise blood pressure, which she also has low blood pressure going along with the hypoglycemia and the chronic adrenal function. And so just in general, I would recommend licorice root for this, but you do have to be careful and see how it affects you. And she's not able to tolerate it. Also, blessed thistle and artichoke leaf are recommended for low blood sugar. And ashwagandha is another plant. Oh, I should have mentioned that with the adrenal glands and just a general tonic. So I'll write that here. And it can be calming or exciting for different people at different times in their life. And for the majority of people, it is calming. So it is an adaptogen. It can work in different ways, but it works directly with the adrenal glands. And then a few other formulas by Dr. Morse that I would recommend for the thinness and malabsorption would be the Superfood Explosion. So his two powder blends, aside from the GI Broom, the Superfood, and then Muscles by Nature. And so we're looking here at providing nutrients and nutrition through greens and leafy greens and herbs, as well as through fruit. So a diet that would be ideal for the situation would be an all fruit diet with supplementation of, I really like celery juice, so I consider celery an herb. I think technically it's like a big it's related, I believe, to parsley. It's like a big herb. That's how I think of celery. So I really like celery for the gut if you can tolerate it. And I would include that in greens and herbs category. So an ideal diet would be fruit, leafy greens, and herbs, and as needed, especially when you're really trying to address underweight and thinness and you're not in the throes of detox, you could use sweet potatoes, even vegetable broth. And vegetable broth I think of as like a medicine broth, because you not only use vegetables, but you can also throw any of these herbs into the broth and have sort of like an herbal tea along with a vegetable broth. So that would be the protocol, the diet. And then these are just some of the herbs that you could use. All right. I'm going to stop that here. If anybody has any questions, I could go on, and I know I have, and I don't want the video to be too long. So I'm going to stop it here, and thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye.